Hi folks, how are you doing? Thank you for joining week 6 of the Sustainable Development Goals for Business Sustainable Development Goals for Business series, and welcome to today's seminar. My name is Orla Feeney. I'm going to be your MC for today's talk on Sustainable Goal 6, Clean Water and Sanitation. As you know, SDG 4B is a free online seminar that explores the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and how these are impacting businesses. As I'm sure you're all aware, the 17 interlinked Sustainable Development Goals were developed to provide a blueprint to a better and more sustainable future for all. Today we're looking at Sustainable Development Goal 6, which aims to ensure clean water and sanitation for all. We're delighted to be joined by a really impressive panel of speakers in the area. We're very lucky. The first speaker is Debbie Chapman. She's currently director of UNEP GEMS, the Water Capacity Development Centre, based in the Environmental Research Institute at UCC. Until 2019, Debbie was also head of environmental science in UCC, and she established the GEMS Water Capacity Development Centre in 2015 in order to provide capacity development for the United Nations Environmental Programme's Global Water Quality Monitoring Initiative, known as GEMS. We're also going to be joined today by one of our own. Fiona Regan is one of our own. She's the founder and co-director and director rather of DCU's Water Institute. She's full professor of chemistry in the School of Chemical Sciences here in DCU. Fiona's research focuses on analytical chemistry in the field of environmental monitoring, and she's special interests in priority and emerging chemicals, as well as the establishment of decision support tools for environmental monitoring using novel technologies and data management tools. Her work includes the areas of separations and sensors, including microfluidics, materials for sensing and anti-fouling applications on aquatic deployed systems. And finally, we are joined by Charlie Coakley. He leads Irish Water's dedicated sustainability policy team, developing and integrating sustainability policies and strategies throughout Irish Water. These policies and strategies are aligned with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, in particular the one we're focusing on today, Sustainable Development Goal 6, Clean Water and Sanitation. So before I pass things over to our speakers, I'm going to suggest that you use the Q&A function to ask any questions you might have. The chat function will be off. You'll find the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We'll compile these and we'll ask all speakers to address as many of these as possible, or as much as we can fit in at the end. So without further delay, I'm going to hand you over to our first speaker, Debbie Chapman.
Hello everybody, thank you Orla, and thank you very much for inviting me to take part in today's seminar. So I've just been introduced, but just to reiterate, I'm the director of the UNEP GEMS Water Capacity Development Centre, which is based in University College Cork. I set the centre up in 2015, and it's primarily funded indirectly by the Government of Ireland, Irish Aid and the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. I'm going to talk about obviously SDG 6, but I'm going to focus rather particularly on one aspect of it, which is the aspect in which we work. Got to make the slides move forward somehow. Whoops, okay. Right, first of all, let me explain who we are. GEMS Water is a bit of a mouthful, as Orla just experienced, the Global Environment Monitoring System for Water. And this was a program established way back in the 1970s with the original purpose of generating a database of global water quality data that could be used by the UN agencies for global scale assessments, particularly water quality, obviously, in this case. So it was a multi-agency program in its original format with involvement from WMO, that's the World Meteorological Organization, UNESCO, UNEP, the UN Environment Programme, and the World Health Organization. And that multi-agency aspect reflected how water crosses all of those domains. Now, the program was very active back in the 80s. I was involved in the 80s and 90s with the program then when I was in the UK. And it went through various ups and downs, funded by different people and for quite some years by Environment Canada. And then in 2014, it was suggested that the program should be revitalized. And this was approved by the United Nations Environment Assembly in 2014 through a resolution, which is how most of the activities of the UNEP are mandated. The basic premise of the program hasn't changed. We're still encouraging water quality data to be generated and shared. And if you want someone to share their water quality data, in particular, in the case of this being a UN program, we're talking about governments, then you need to support them in some way or offer them something in return. So since its inception, the GEMS Water program has offered some form of capacity development. In the old days, of course, pre-computers, it was mainly down to documentation and workshops and one-on-one consultations. But over the years, things have changed slightly. But the key objective of the program hasn't changed that much. Since we revived the program in 2014, 2015, with our partners in Germany, in the Federal Institute of Hydrology, they now have the GEMS water quality database called GEMSTAT. And here in Cork, we take care of the capacity development aspects of the program. There is an administrative headquarters in Nairobi. And as you can see from the little global map, we have engaged now over the last few years, pretty much at global scale and in all regions, all world regions, but not with every country yet, but we're working on it. So the Capacity Development Centre has some main activities. These were decided when we set it up in 2015. Things changed with time and the scope has grown somewhat, but primarily we offer training and education in water quality monitoring. This is in order to support governments in being able to generate reliable and believable water quality data from their monitoring activities. So we run workshops, targeted workshops or tailored training if on request in different world regions. We've developed online training, which includes an MSc and a postgraduate diploma, various continuous professional development modules, and we're currently in the process of producing a small number of open access modules that will be offered through UNEP's own e-learning platform. The introduction of the SDGs gave us another task, and we've been involved in those since they started. And we were there for the methodology development, the implementation, support and reporting. And that's what I'm going to focus on for the rest of this presentation. We also give advice and support, which is mostly on request, and that obviously depends on available resources. And that can be quite restrictive because of the finite resources, because this is basically a funded program. A new development is the World Water Quality Alliance. This was formed, I suppose, officially last year. And we're now leading within that alliance a capacity development consortium, and that's in the process of being finalized now and should be operational from 2021. And if people want more information on those, I can give you that information as you want it. Oops, I'm having issues seeing how to move my slides back and forth, but I think we're there okay. So SDG 6, the water goal, which is the focus of this seminar today. And it's, as you're all aware, it's the clean water and sanitation goal. And what it says is to ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Within our program, within UNEP and within GEMS Water, we were delighted when this goal was included into the SDGs because there was nothing equivalent during the Millennium Development Goals. There was a focus on water and sanitation only. So this was a major step forward. And what's particularly relevant, of course, is that water has interactions with almost every aspect of sustainable development. So it was quite appropriate that there should be a dedicated goal for fresh water. And as you're all aware, fresh water provides drinking water, hydropower and energy, fisheries, recreation opportunities, irrigation for crops, water for industry, and many other ecosystem services. And so as you can see from the little spidery diagram there, it links with almost all other SDGs in some way or other. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with the way the SDGs work. Primarily, they're a government-driven process, and governments have decided to interact with them in different ways. But every few years, governments are required to report back to the UN system on what they're doing and the progress they're making with respect to these particular SDGs. SDG 6 is, I suppose, I'm not quite sure the way to word it, but it's being managed, looked after, if you like, by UN Water. And UN Water comprises the other UN agencies that have an involvement with water in some way. And what UN Water wanted to do with SDG 6 was to take an integrated approach to the sustainable use and management of fresh water. So SDG 6 is actually made up of several targets, which you can see here. And in amongst those are the old Millennium Indicators, drinking water and sanitation. But for the first time, ecosystems or freshwater ecosystems were actually considered to be important in the sustainability agenda. Focusing there particularly on target 6.3, this is the one that we, GEMS Water, are working with closely. And what target 6.3 says is that by 2030, we should improve water quality by reducing pollution, eliminating dumping and minimizing release of hazardous chemicals and materials, halving the proportion of untreated wastewater, and substantially increasing recycling and safe reuse globally. So if you're going to do those things, and if you're going to actually look at progress over time, you need some kind of indicators that you can use to measure that progress. So the way UN Water has approached SDG 6 is to allocate a custodian agency, if you like, out of its partners in the UN system to each of the indicators for each of those targets. So our target is all about water pollution and improving water recycling, reuse, reducing pollution, and getting towards good water quality. So one of those two indicators within target 6.3 is SDG Indicator 6.3.2, the proportion of bodies of water with good ambient water quality. And UNEP, UN Environment Programme, is the custodian agency for that indicator out of those 11 indicators under SDG 6. Now, what this basically means is that we have certain responsibilities to assist governments globally with this indicator in particular, and to interact where we can with the other indicators of the other targets within SDG 6. So since we were brought in to help with this indicator back in, I suppose it would have been 2016 now at this stage, we've done a number of things. We helped with development of the indicator methodology, both for the pilot phase of the indicator development and also for the baseline data drive, which took place in 2017. If you're going to ask countries to generate information and pass it on to the UN system, they need to know what they should be doing, what information to collect, and how to do it. So we had to prepare, and we delivered as well online tutorials, we gave live webinars, we produced guidance documents, and these were done and translated by the UN system, so they were available in different languages. And then also we provided support through various workshops and sometimes to individuals and small groups of countries that gathered themselves together. There were some specific budgets for this through the UN water system, I think funded by the Netherlands. The data drive happened in 2017, and then after that, of course, you had to look at how effective was it, improve the methodology for the next data drive, which is currently just closing in 2020. And we, as a result of some of these ongoing issues with methodology and countries struggling, we now also give assistance to countries with their indicator calculation. We help with the analysing of the implementation and data and preparation of reports. And what we're also doing now is exploring additional methods for data generation. The first report on the first data drive is available. That's what it looks like is there in the picture, and it's available on the website, and the links are given on the last slide for that. So when we were asked back in 2016, how do we come up with an indicator that's going to measure progress towards good ambient water quality? The first question was, well, what do we mean by good ambient water quality? And following the initial meetings, came up with the concept that good ambient water quality does not damage ecosystem function or present a risk to human health. That means it shouldn't be severely impacted by human activities. And that is where there is a link then with indicator 631, which is all to do with industrial and municipal pollution. It should support a balanced ecosystem, which includes fisheries, which is very important for food in some world regions. And it should be safe for recreational activities such as water contact activities. And the reason for saying that is because in some parts of the world, water is used as drinking water without treatment. So if you can safely swim in it, then it should be reasonably safe to drink as well. At least probably not worse than they're using currently in some parts of the world. The big challenge, of course, is if you're going to need to measure progress towards ambient water quality. First of all, you've got to be able to assess ambient water quality. You've got to be able to decide what is good water quality. And then when you can do that, you've got to be able to do it at national scale, because SDG indicators are reported at national scale. So in other words, a government, usually the government statistical offices, reports a value for that indicator to the UN statistical system. So whatever the assessment is, it has to represent national scale. But of course, we have big issues globally, and this is something that GEMS Water has really been trying to help and address over the years, that not all countries at different levels of economic development can do everything you ask them to do for various reasons. It could be financial, could be personnel, could be technical difficulties, just could be scale in some cases. So that's one problem. And the other major problem was that the indicator that was produced or was going to be used to measure progress towards 2030 for water quality had to be somehow globally comparable. And when you consider the differences in economic development, that was actually quite challenging. So what do we come up with in the end? The methodology that was agreed in the end was, after the piloting and then the first data drive, it was refined and eventually came down to 2 levels. And the 2 levels are supposed to allow progression in countries. So the basic needs and the basic resources should support level 1, and then after, with increasing resources and technical ability, you can move up to, say, level 2. So level 1 uses a very simple water quality index, which is made up from very basic core physicochemical water quality parameters. And that is the official level 1 reporting that goes from national statistical offices to the UN statistical system. Level 2 includes monitoring of additional parameters or other approaches, such as the use of biological, ecological monitoring, microbiological, and increasingly so citizen science and Earth observations. So just very simply, the indicator that is used, first of all, you have to define your water bodies, because the indicator says proportion of bodies of water. So countries first have to define their water bodies, rivers, lakes, and groundwaters, they're all included. And for many, particularly in Europe, of course, this is already done, and to a very, very fine scale. But as we've discovered in other parts of the world, it's sometimes not even done at all, or it's done to a very crude scale. And the finer the scale, the more effort required to monitor the water quality, of course. So first you define your water bodies, then you carry out your very basic physicochemical measurements, which would be part of a national monitoring program in the ideal scenario where the database is central and all of these data are collected and can be very easily then assimilated into the index. In order to determine whether the water quality is good or not, you have to have some kind of target for what is good water quality. And so that means having target values for the various parameters. And because these are physicochemical, that has various issues associated with it, but it was the simplest approach that could be applied to everybody. And then again, what's good quality or not? It was decided, having looked, and this was done by a big team. I don't mean we did it all in Cork. There was a big team from UN Water that got together to look at this methodology and to refine it. It was decided that good quality was when 80% of measurements made for any particular parameter met that target value. So that was the premise of the index, if you like. Now you can't have target values that apply all over the world. So we tell countries they can set their own target values for good ambient water quality. And of course, depending on your climatological, geological situation, they may vary enormously from country to country. And whereas in Europe, we have a very good sense of what is our good water quality, there are certainly other parts of the world where they have no idea. So they've required a lot of support, including help with actually defining their own target values. So if any country has less than 80% of the measures meeting the target value, then the water is classified as not good. If 80% meet the target values, then the water is good. So this is a very simple index. It's good or not good. There's no scale in between. We could have done this, but the feeling was that it was too complicated for many of the more developing countries that struggled anyway with even having water quality monitoring of some of these very basic parameters, let alone all of them. And being able to apply a complicated index simply wouldn't work because they don't have regular enough monitoring going on in enough water bodies. So the first data drive, only about 52 countries reported, and some of those reports were not great. The data are sent to GEMSTAT, our partners in Koblenz in Germany. They quality assure the data, and they check it, and they go back to the country if necessary to clarify things. Some countries simply couldn't report because they didn't have enough time. The time notice to do it was quite short in the first data drive, much better this year, I have to say. Sometimes they simply didn't have the information or hadn't heard about it and didn't know where to go. And many other countries just didn't think it was necessary. But in fact, all governments signed up to this as part of the UN, or UN members had signed up to it. So we also had to spread the word that this was something they should be doing. And again, the variability in what was reported was huge. Some countries only reported a few of their monitoring stations. Some countries reported a lot, and some countries had very few monitoring stations. So it was not terribly satisfactory, but it showed that the methodology could work, and we did some trials and some tests to show that it did. Not unsurprising, countries with a higher GDP tended to use more monitoring stations, but some countries, even with many monitoring stations and a high GDP, for some reason chose only to use a few. So with the next data drive, which is just, as I said, coming to a close, we're still asking countries to monitor for level 1 and to use the same simple water quality index, and then for each water body, and then to calculate that as a percentage which come up with the good as opposed to the not good score. And only level 1 is currently being reported to the UN Statistical Division. We are offering greater support, so we're able to help more countries to calculate their indicator if they're willing to share the data, and that has been done by some countries, particularly in Africa, for example. We're anticipating getting something in excess of 80. We have something close to that now, and there are a few countries who are saying, well, can you just wait another week or so? We're nearly ready. So I suppose by the end of the year, we should have at least 80, maybe a good few more than that. What we've done this time, though, is encourage countries to provide level 2 data as a supplementary source of information and to help fill gaps. And what's interesting is then we can make a comparison between level 2 and level 1, which may enable the results of level 2 and 1, which may enable us then to refine the methodology even further. And some countries have offered themselves to trial the use of citizen data and Earth observation for level 2 and integrating it into level 1 submissions. Now, for the moment, that won't count, but it may on the next data drive if it's shown to work well. We can't submit data to the UN Statistical Office unless the countries have approved it. So even if we calculate for a country, they have to say it's okay. And that's pretty much what's happened within the European Union. Data has been taken from the EU database, calculations have been done for countries, but countries have to agree that it's correct before it's allowed to be submitted, because it doesn't agree with the way the normal Water Framework Directive assessment of water quality is carried out. So that's really what our involvement has been with the SDGs to date. What comes next? Well, we have to analyze and interpret the 2020 data submissions, and I'm sure that will be very interesting, especially with level 2 coming in. We still have to work on global participation before the next data drive in 2023. Because 80 countries, even 80 might sound good, but that's not good enough in the UN terms. We want to encourage countries to participate in the World Water Quality Alliance, because one of the objectives of the Alliance is to foster improved interaction with SDG 6, and particularly the Water Quality Indicator for SDG 6, and also to help get data towards a global assessment. We're also trying to encourage community involvement, because some of the work we've done in other developing countries has showed that community involvement can be very important for encouraging or making a difference as to what happens on a local scale, which then, if you like, works from the bottom up towards making an influence in government levels. So as this was a business oriented seminar, I thought, well, could business help here somewhere? We obviously want to encourage everybody who has water quality data to share that data, not just through GEMSTAT, which is then where it's made available for global assessments through the UN system, but also maybe that data could be used to supplement lack of other data for SDG 632 reporting. The Carbon Disclosure Project, they have data collection systems in place, and I know a lot of industries do submit data to that, and we were in discussion with them a couple of years ago about expanding on their water quality data collection, and hopefully that is one route. And you can of course offer to share data directly through GEMSTAT if you wish to. Also, industry could help nationally for level 2 reporting. Maybe some ideas might come out of that from this seminar. And industry often has a good involvement with local communities and citizens, and they could help support them in getting level 2 data collected towards the SDG process. And of course, industry is very much involved in wastewater disposal, not all industry, but some. And that is the indicator 631, which is being looked after by UN Habitat primarily, and can't remember the other organization, WHO, I think maybe. But what industry does has an impact on ambient water quality. So obviously industry can foster an appreciation of SDG 6 and also encourage more recycling and reuse and reduction of pollution, which in the long term has benefits for good ambient water quality. And that is actually what we're, of course, aiming for and hoping to get to by 2030. It's a tall ask, but and a slow process, but I think we will make progress by then. So that's all from me. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie, for a really, really interesting piece there. such a complex project, so many moving parts. Particularly thank you for kind of contextualizing it there in terms of business solutions towards the end. It's a really nice way for us to think about that, given that we're in the business school. I'm going to encourage attendees to make sure you pop your questions into the Q&A box below, because we're going to collate them at the end, and we'll kind of deal with the questions in kind of a panel discussion sort of a context. So we're going to move on now to Professor Fiona Regan. Just to remind you, Fiona is the director of DCU's Water Institute and is a full professor of chemistry in the School of Chemical Sciences in DCU. So I shall stop talking now and let her get stuck in. Thank you.
Now, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Right. Okay.
Good stuff.
And I can't show my video, but that doesn't really matter. There. Okay. Thank you, and Debbie, great starting presentation. So and a great context in terms of the Sustainable Development Goal 6, clean water and sanitation. And I suppose in the context of everything that we do in the Institute, SDG 6 really underpins what we do here. And I'll go through some of the projects. The focus really of this presentation is going through the projects that we do. Sorry, like Debbie, I'm having problem forwarding and reversing the slides, so just bear with me. So just very quickly to talk about the Institute, our mission essentially is to look at solving problems related to water through research that we do. Everything that we do within the Institute is research, but through partnership. And then we develop solutions that help to address the major water challenges. In this, I suppose we have some significant technologies that we use, and they include, as shown here on the slide, they include things like advanced analytical separations, data analytics and image processing, membrane technologies, nano water technologies, and engineering solutions for water flows. Really to look at being the go-to place for many of the technology solutions for addressing water challenges. And some of the focus areas in the last year would be emerging contaminants and human health. We develop novel sensors and biosensors, more recently in the environmental DNA space, data analytics and water Internet of Things, and then trying to advance analytical methodologies and innovative engineering solutions. So we know, and I won't dwell on this because Debbie has dealt with it robustly, but I suppose the focus for us in the Institute is to look at what the global challenges are in terms of water, the clean water issue and sanitation. And I suppose, you know, in terms of Ireland and it being a small island and having lots of rainfall, there is still obviously the challenge in how that the demand-led approach to water is dealt with, and clean water is certainly an issue here. So there's learnings that we can have here then that can be translated in a global context. So just to give a snapshot of the work that we do that is aligned with each of the targets and indicators, and I'm going to just zip through these because Debbie has gone through them in good detail. But I suppose focusing on 6.1, which really focuses on access to safe and affordable drinking water. And then 6.3, looking at improving water quality by reducing pollution, as she pointed out also. And one of the major focuses of the Institute, we have a number of significant research projects looking at the question of chemicals, the chemical cocktail in the water, and trying to actually influence policy around removing chemicals and reducing the use of chemicals. And that's across the board, from some of the very polar pharmaceuticals or herbicides right through to the very non-polar petroleum type compounds. And that is a really key objective of the work that we do. Also, some of the projects involve the use of looking at water efficiency, use efficiency, energy exergy analysis, so that nexus between water and energy is obviously very important, and looking at ways in collaborating with other institutions in Mexico, for example, and in Spain, where water is stressed. We look at issues around water scarcity. And then looking at the topic of protection and restoration of water-related ecosystems, some of the citizen science work in particular is looking at this to look at how citizens can be engaged in these kind of restoration remediation type projects. Expanding our international cooperation, that is really important. Again, we have partners across many countries. I mentioned the Water Institute in Mexico City. Also, we collaborate with Stockholm Water Institute, with ICRA, the Catalonian Water Institute, and also with Biodesign in Arizona. All of these providing information from a global context around capacity building need, and also that international cooperation which is required to deal with these kind of challenges. Okay, so just that brings me on, I suppose, to a project which we work on with Rolf Halden at Biodesign in Arizona, where we are looking at sewage as being an indicator of the impact of wastewater and chemicals on human health. Excuse me. And this has been a multi-partner collaboration where we've looked at essentially taking information from wastewater in Ireland through collaboration with other organisations, wastewater providing information on exposure and effects within human health and also ecosystem health. And I suppose the idea then is to gather information, excuse me, gather information from these samples to provide, I suppose, solutions through environmental decision support systems where we can actually start to look at solving problems. So we look at emerging contaminants, chemicals of concern. We look at the sources of these, wastewater being one. We develop advanced technologies that can be used to measure these. And then that creates information that can provide decision support tools to help inform policy. And we have in recent years been the go-to place, for example, for the EPA to do their watch list chemical monitoring, because this information needs to be provided to the European Union in terms of new chemicals that could be added as priority substances for monitoring in the future. So this work that we do can provide information to inform policy. So I suppose a really stark statistic or piece of information is that 42 new chemicals are discovered every hour. And so then there are the challenges of how you monitor for these, how you look at removing these or replacing these, and their transformation products and the impact of those transformation products where there's very little information around risk for the ecosystem or for health. I show two chemicals here, which are endocrine disruptors. These are estrogen-based chemicals, and many substances act to mimic these chemicals and therefore provide really challenging subjects for removal or replacement, or indeed monitoring. And this really is a focus of our work. These chemical substances, which are known as chemicals of emerging concern, are becoming more increasingly monitored across Europe and globally. However, there's very little information around their occurrence as mixtures and therefore their effect, either chronic or acute effect within the ecosystem or for human health. One of the projects that we've just recently concluded is around phthalates, and phthalates are chemicals that are ubiquitous. They occur in all kinds of products, everything from coverings of surfaces to plastic bottles, inside of cans and so on. But these are known to have many health effects. And so humans are exposed to these. And we studied some breakdown products of these phthalates, which are known as monoesters, because these can be an indicator of the human burden of the chemicals. And so we used influent to a wastewater treatment plant to determine the level of exposure of these. And this is really important work because it now looks at the sources of these chemicals and potentially how these sources can be reduced in the future. As I said, we collaborate internationally, and here are some of the partners that have worked on this wastewater epidemiology, which we call it, work: Arizona State University, Tec de Monterrey, and the Water Institute in Mexico, King's College in London, Leon Barron, and then ourselves. And this was funded through a global consortium of sustainable organizations. Another area that we look at is trying to provide information where information is currently not available in real time. And so on this graph, we have a series of lines that indicate measurements that are taken every 15 minutes, and the information can be available immediately. But why is that important? That is important because it can tell us when algal blooms are occurring. It can tell us, for example, if there's high turbidity, so there may be suspended material that has bacteria on it. And so it's important information that can actually help, again, make decisions. We've done a lot of work in Dublin Bay over the last number of years, probably since about 2009, and collecting information on where the hotspots are in terms of bacterial contamination is important in terms of understanding bathing water quality. But real-time information is important. And so we like to use open data sources for this to be able to provide information in real time so that the agencies, for example, can take action in relation to that. Algal blooms are important, not only for bathing water quality, but also in terms of aquaculture and other leisure uses. So this is important. This is one example where our information was we were able to use turbidity information in real time to indicate where there were elevated levels of E. coli, which is bacteria, fecal indicator bacteria, and that's shown in red, and also enterococci, which are also critically important bacterial species that are typically reported on to the EPA. So our real-time measurements were able to be linked in with levels of bacteria. And so this is important in terms of providing people with information. Another area of work that we have done is taken sensors that have been used, for example, for oil level monitoring in tanks. We've deployed these in a variety of rivers in Dublin, and we were able to use these to show the variation in water depth. And I've taken 3 examples of different storms over the past couple of years, where we were able to see these sensors, very low cost technology, be able to pick up the water level increases due to these storms. So what I'm saying here really is deploying sensor technologies, low cost technologies, and integrating that into decision support systems can help us to understand better and to respond better to these kind of events. So that's Storm Connor, where we're able to identify increases in water levels, and also Storm Ewan, and we had others. There were plenty of storms over the last number of years. A technology that we have developed in recent years is called Coakley Sense, which is a handheld device that we have developed for measuring bathing water quality. And we're currently looking at commercializing this. But this has gained quite a lot of interest, even from organizations such as UNICEF, where low-cost devices are really desirable to be able to give indications of water quality where human health is impacted. So we have built this system, we've tested it. There's a river test shown there, but we've tested it on 2 specific areas over 2 years on bathing water quality. We beta tested it with Fingal County Council, with Dunleary, and with Waterford County Councils. And so, as I say, we're now going to commercialize it. And I'm just showing here how I went on to I did a TV interview on this technology to show how simple the technology is to work. And then we also did a commercialization study to look at seeing if we could gain some additional funding on that, and that is still progressing. This is a really exciting technology development, and also shows how we can take stuff from the lab and also deliver solutions in the field. Taking that a little bit further, I suppose, whereby we have done laboratory stage work, but also then it's really important to take the work from the laboratory into the field. We've done another pilot study looking at removal of ammonia from wastewater. And this is really important because obviously nitrogen species are critical in terms of Irish waters and across Europe as well, globally in fact, where agriculture impacts water quality, and nitrogen is a really important pollutant. And so removal of nitrogen species from water is important. And here is a company that we collaborated with, where we were allowed to divert some of their wastewater to test this pilot membrane system. So we had developed some technology in the laboratory. We then worked with a company to pilot this to actually then produce a product, ammonium sulfate fertilizer. So this kind of work that we do in the Institute obviously means that we have to collaborate across disciplines. So everything from chemistry, which is my own domain area, through to engineering, mechanical engineering, electronic engineering, and also in biotechnology, where you look at using membranes to remove species like ammonia, for example. So cross-discipline work is really key to success. The final topic that I want to just address is more recent work that we've been doing over the last 2 years in citizen science, which has become, I suppose, more important. And Debbie alluded to this in terms of the data that can be collected from it. We have a project on the River Liffey, which is called Backdrop, where we are asking citizens to take water samples once a month, which they've been doing over the last 2 years. But we also have a group of paddleboarders who are taking water samples and images from the water itself. And this has been really important because this slide shows on the right hand side a pipe, but there are many of these inflows which have not been mapped or have not been identified that are polluting sources into the River Liffey. And so for the first time, we've been able to map those by using the help of citizen scientists. We've also been measuring nutrients. Here we show a map which shows nitrate levels measured by citizen scientists on the Liffey. And also we've been measuring phosphate levels. And this also shows the housing stock map, which is interesting because you can see where elevated levels of phosphate occur corresponds to perhaps where pipework may have been misaligned. And so we have elevated levels of phosphate where there are apartment blocks in this case around the Dublin area. So finally, this is a slide just showing the pillars of research areas that we have in the Water Institute. Energy is one of these pillars, water and health, marine and sustainable agriculture, and we have a whole range of projects across these. And they are underpinned by those technology areas that I mentioned at the start. But at the forefront of all of our projects is aligning with SDG 6. Obviously SDG 14 on the marine side, but clean water sanitation falls under the energy pillar, water and health pillar, and sustainable agriculture pillar in projects like I have described just now. So what else do? We collaborate. We're a centre with greater than 40 PIs across 5 faculties of DCU. We focus on impact. All of our projects have partners from either the business area or NGOs or agencies. We translate our knowledge to impact. For our fundamental science leads to solutions. So everything we do in the lab must lead to a deployment or some kind of policy impact. And we communicate. We're involved in a number of significant international networks. One of these is the Norman Network, and I picked that one out because they're very focused on chemicals of emerging concern, but many other important networks also. And so we can be found on dcuwater.ie, our website. It will give you an indication of the work that we do, and also on LinkedIn, but also on Twitter. We really like to, I suppose, get out there the importance of water awareness. And Debbie did allude to the importance around water reuse. And this is something really that we're trying to make people aware of, the importance of conservation and reuse of water. And so we use our social media for those reasons. So if you're interested, please get in touch. And also if you're interested in collaborating on our citizen science work or any of the other projects, or if you need any more information, please get in touch. Because this, I suppose, the invitation to this business seminar is really important for us, because I would say 75% of our projects involve business partners. And, in that regard, the focus of the project is really around impact. And many of them are short term, We use Enterprise Ireland voucher scheme, innovation partnerships, and we have a disruptive technology fund also. So we use the mechanisms to work with industry to fund projects to address some of the challenges that I've mentioned. So thanks for listening, and thanks for the invitation, and I'll take questions at the end.
Thank you, Fiona. That was really, really interesting, and a lovely, it jigsawed into Debbie's in a lovely way. So that was really interesting. Thank you. We will move on. I'm just going to remind everybody, don't forget to pop your questions into the Q&A at the end, and we can deal with them at the end. We're going to move on now to Charlie Coakley. Just to remind you, Charlie leads Irish Water's dedicated sustainability policy team, developing and integrating sustainability policy and strategies throughout Irish Water. So once again, I shall be quiet.
Okay. Thanks, Dora. Sorry, I was just trying to organize the controls there. Thanks for the introduction. I lead up the sustainability policy team in Irish Water. Sorry, can you hear me and can you see the screen?
Yes, absolutely. All
Great.
good.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. And today I'm going to talk about how we champion SDG 6, SDG 6 and relationship with the other goals, and how we are embedding the goals within our business. But first, just a bit of background on who we are. We're responsible for delivering safe, clean and drinking water and environmentally safe wastewater to services and households and businesses right across Ireland. And these vital services underpin the social and economic progress for Ireland now and into the future. And we deliver water services to approximately 83% of the Irish population. You can see there on the map there on the left-hand side is the distribution of our water treatment plants. And on the right-hand side, the red dots is the distribution of our wastewater treatment plants. And we operate and maintain nearly 1,900 water and wastewater treatment plants and over 5,000 other assets, that's including pumping stations and reservoirs. And in terms of our water treatment plants, we are producing 1.7 billion litres of drinking water per day through approximately 63,000 kilometres of water mains. And that's producing circa 26,000 tonnes dry solids of water sludge per annum. In terms of our water treatment plants, they're treating a little over 1.2 billion litres of wastewater per day through roughly 25,000 kilometres of wastewater network. And that's producing 58,000 tonnes dry solids of wastewater per annum. And all that pumping and treating requires an awful lot of energy and in particular electricity. And to that respect, we have over 8,000 electricity meters. And we're consuming 1,000 gigawatt hours per annum in primary energy. We are the largest electrical energy consumer in the public sector, and we're accounting for almost 21% of public sector consumption. And that's accounting for a little over 210,000 tonnes of CO2 per annum. Sustainability and sustainable development underpins our commitment to protect and enhance the environment. And they're key considerations of both our water resources and wastewater planning. And our internal policies are aligned with the goals. We have a dedicated sustainability team within asset management. And our role, our remit, I guess, is developing and integrating sustainability as BAU or business as usual. And we're developing sustainability policies and strategies that are aligned both with Project Ireland 2040 and the goals. The UN Sustainable Development Goals have set an ambitious framework, and water services has an individual goal, SDG 6, clean water and sanitation. And thematically, as the other speakers have mentioned, all the goals are interconnected. And our performance, our Irish Water's performance under SDG 6 influences national progress and development at a systemic level. And that's ultimately affecting individual well-being. And on a global level, SDG 6 is pivotal to achieving a lot of the other goals, again, alluded to by our other presenters here today, ranging from no poverty and zero hunger right across to life below water and life on land. Sustainability and sustainable development is embedded in our water services strategic plan, the WSSSP, with a vision that states, through the responsible stewardship, efficient management and strong partnerships, Ireland has a world-class infrastructure that ensure secure and sustainable water services, essential for our health, our communities, the economy and the environment. The WSEE sets out our overall strategic planning framework with commitments and strategic aims that are underpinned by sustainability and sustainable development. The WSSP was published in 2015, and since then, our vision, commitments, and strategic aims have been incorporated into our business through both policies and strategies. We are aligning these policies and strategies with the goals and Project Ireland 2040 to ensure that the integration and embedding of sustainability and sustainable development translates into everything that we do in Irish Water. Now, moving on briefly, our linkages under SDGs G6 with some of the other goals. Goal 3, which is good health and well-being. We are managing the sustainability and quality of drinking water from source to tap to ensure a safe and reliable water supply, essential for human health and well-being. And shortly, we'll be publishing the National Water Resources Plan, the NWRP, which takes a 25-year strategic look at water resources across Ireland. Goal 7, affordable and clean energy. We are implementing a sustainable energy strategy to become an energy efficient, low carbon, sustainable water utility, including implementing a strategic initiative in partnership with the SEI, the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland, to embed energy efficiency and EED, energy efficiency design, as BAU. And we have 36 energy action plans right across the business, including EED, as I mentioned, energy innovation, energy retrofit upgrades, renewable energy, lighting and heating, capital maintenance, just to mention a few, and process optimization. And within those energy action plans, we have 255 discrete energy projects. And currently, we're running at a 30% energy efficiency improvement, and that's against a baseline of 2009, putting us in a strong position to meet our new target of our 50% energy efficiency improvement by 2030. And our projects have abated our over 75,000 tons of carbon, which is helping us de-link our energy use from our carbon emissions. So we're making that break from our usage on energy and carbon emissions. Goal 8, which is decent work and economic growth. We're investing in our assets while maintaining a sustainable balance between meeting customer standards, protecting the environment, and supporting economic development and growth of the country. In the period up to 2019, 3.9 billion was spent on asset improvements, with plans for a further 5 billion up to 2024. And on the table there on the right-hand side, under the heading of drinking water, you can see that 47 treatment plants have been built, upgraded. Nearly 2,000 kilometres of water mains have been replaced. We have a reservoir refurbishment programme, and also we have a national leakage reduction programme. Reducing leakage is a critical priority for us within Irish Water. In pre-2014, there was really no national approach, there was no leakage management system. Now we have a dedicated national leakage reduction programme. We're targeting savings of 166 million litres per day with a dedicated find and fix teams, and mains replacement, pressure management, first fix for free scheme, and over 500 million ring fence for investment up to 2021. In 2014, the leakage rate was running at 49%. In 2017, this had dropped to 47%. In 2019, this had dropped further to 43%. We're aiming to get to 38% by 2021. Moving on. Goal 11, which is sustainable cities and communities. We are supporting Ireland's social and economic growth through sustainable investment in water services. Of the 5 billion that I mentioned earlier, 2.4 billion is for future-proofing through improving and building capacity and resilience. Goal 12, which is responsible consumption and production. We are promoting a circular economy approach across all our business in the management of our sludge, a valuable resource, particularly in the context of the circular economy model. And we champion water conservation and efficiency, water being a precious finite natural resource. We were at the forefront of conservation throughout 2018, one of the most challenging years we've had in the context of drought, but also storms. Goal 13, which is climate action. We're implementing a climate change policy to adapt to and mitigate the effects of climate change by developing a resilient, low carbon water and wastewater service. We collaborated with the department and others in producing the National Climate Change Adaptation Plan for the water sector, which was published last year. And we're developing plans to move towards carbon neutrality, including further development of renewable energy sources. In 2019, saw the construction of two photovoltaic solar power plants, one at Nina in County Tipperary and in Newcastle West in Limerick. And these two pilot projects are informing a larger programme for us within Irish Water. Goal 14, which is life below water, we're providing sustainable treatment of wastewater from drain to sea. Goal 15, life on land. We're implementing a biodiversity policy and developing a biodiversity action plan to ensure that biodiversity and the national environment are conserved, protected, and where practical, enhanced. On the table there, under the heading of wastewater, you can see what has been some of the achievements to date. In terms of treatment plants, over 100 treatment plants have been built or upgraded. In terms of sewer mains, nearly 220 kilometres, over 220 kilometres replaced. We have a large plant optimization programme. We have a priority source control programme, and we're aiming to eliminate raw sewage discharges. Currently, we reached a milestone recently in being able to reach the 50% milestone in eliminating raw sewage discharge, and we're aiming on track to eliminate all raw sewage by 2024. Overall, that's really a whistle-stop tour in terms of SDG 6 and Irish Water. But I hope you can see, I hope it's able to get across and that you can see that the interrelationship between the goals and the overall achievement of SDG 6 and indicators under SDG 6 really are independent and they require collaboration across society as a whole. Water is one of the most essential substances on Earth. It's critical for human health, to production of food, and for industrial activity. The provision of a clean drinking water and reliable wastewater service in a manner that protects the national environment is critical to a country's economic and social development. Water is part of our everyday lives. We need it when we turn on the taps to get a drink, to wash our dishes and clothes, to have a shower, and to flush the toilet. Businesses throughout the country depend on reliable water supply, from coffee shops and restaurants to hairdressers and farming enterprises to multinationals. It's essential to everything that we do. We have made significant progress on our sustainability journey of embedding the SDGs into everything that we do. We recognise that we have a social and an environmental obligation, combined with a business interest, to be proactive in ensuring sustainable development is enshrined into our business ethos. Irish Water, as guardians of Ireland's water and wastewater assets, with a dedicated sustainability team, champion sustainability and sustainable development under SDG 6, clean water and sanitation. Thanks very much. I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks so much, Charlie. God, that was really interesting, and I can see some questions coming in. If Debbie and Fiona want to turn on your cameras, and listen, I'm not in this research space, but I was actually really enthralled for the last hour. I love how Debbie brought that global kind of macro perspective. Fiona comes in with all the technological solutions, and then Charlie tells us the Irish story. It all came together really, really nicely. Before we get into the questions, how is Ireland doing in terms of sustainable development goals, like in comparison with, say, other countries? Are we the best in class, or are we getting there? Are we improving? And that possibly is for Charlie, but possibly for anybody who wants to weigh in.
We're on a journey, and we're getting there.
Yeah. I'm going to go now, guys. I'm going to encourage you to pop your questions into the Q&A because this is a golden opportunity to get the insights of real life experts. There's a question here from Fiona. Do we need the same quality? Well, that's a really, really good question. Do we need the same quality water for washing our car as we do for drinking? And if we do, how do we reconcile that in terms of sustainability?
Is that the question to me, Orla?
Anybody that would like to weigh in, Charlie?
Well, I give an opinion on it. Most definitely, we don't need the same quality. Drink potable water supply is for potable water. It clues in the name. It's potable. We need it a certain level to ingest it into our systems. Most definitely for cleaning, we do not. We could use rainwater harvesting or even grey water. I wouldn't be using grey water, but potentially we can be using rainwater harvesting or conserving water. I myself, I live in the country. I have a few sheds out the back, and I do conserve the water and underwater. But an interesting point there was made earlier in terms of the amount of water that Ireland gets. We're not a water scarce country, but enough water falls probably in a week, or if not 2 weeks in Ireland, to do us for the whole year. But it's just that we have no way of storing that water. We have no reservoir for holding that water. A lot of our abstractions are coming from either ground source or from the river. So it's as one of the presenters alluded to, it's demand-led supply. Yeah,
it's the same conversation is had every year. If we have a mild summer, a long summer, and then we're saying, oh my God, half of Cork was underwater. How can we be in this situation? But it's about the infrastructure and so.
That's correct.
Isn't it? Yeah. I'm keeping an eye on the question box. It's quiet, but I suspect we did lose a couple of numbers there at 2 o'clock. I suspect some people might have run off things. I was really taken, Fiona, about the data when we have it. Oh my goodness, Fiona, I was just about to raise a question about data as well. I was really taken in your presentation, Fiona, about data and how that has completely changed the scope of your work.
Yep.
And do you want to talk a little bit about that, because that really comes across in your presentation?
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and it actually in the context of business interactions, it's really important. We deal with a lot of companies who now work with us because they want to, I suppose, improve their digital part of the business in what they do with water. So in other words, they want to manage, let's say, failures in real time, or they want to manage flows, or they want to understand the impact of rainfall or whatever it is, but it involves data. Not all big data, but certainly involves data. And so there's a call for more devices that can be distributed, low cost devices or kind of affordable. And also with larger, let's say, consultancies, engineering consultancies, they're really interested in pushing information and decision support tools. And so behind that is collecting data. And so that requires technologies. So absolutely, I mean, it has driven in a great way, particularly the work that we would do in the marine environment has driven in a great way the opportunities for us to do research on things like environmental DNA, where there's demand now to look at, let's say, invasive species, where it wouldn't have been before, and getting that information more frequently. Not obviously in real time, but more frequently, and using communications technologies, so linking in with the comms companies. So absolutely, the need for more information kind of trickles down then in terms of the technology development, and it's all about linking in with businesses and seeing what the opportunities for the businesses are in terms of, let's say, compliance monitoring, or opening up, let's say, a device market. For example, with our Coakley Sense system, there's industries that would be interested in scaling that up and selling it in the developing world, and so on. So yeah, absolutely. With the need for more data and the development of decision support tools, it's not the data that's important that people are interested in, it's in the provision of information.
Yeah, because the data almost creates a pressure for you to move up the food chain then, and what do you do with that, and how does that create impact? Yeah. I will be taking a more critical eye of the paddle boarders at the weekend when I'm out cycling with the kids and I see them.
They're so valuable. Absolutely.
Yeah, those guys.
Yeah, really
those guys
valuable.
are doing good work. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And isn't it ingenious? Like, it's an ingenious way to gather data from.
Well, if I can just give you an anecdote, we had a paddleboard group who were taking their monthly sample, and they spotted what seemed to be suds on the water, and they sat for a moment, or stayed stationary for a moment, and it stopped. The flow coming out of a pipe stopped. So what they had viewed was an actual cycle of a washing machine. So, this would be missed if you were sitting on the side of the river. Okay, so citizens are so invaluable, and once they're trained and they have robust methods. It's such an invaluable way of filling gaps in data.
Yeah, well,
Debbie has published in this. Debbie has done lots of work in citizen science and knows the value of this. And certainly in terms of meeting the data gaps in SDGs, it can play some role.
Yeah, it sounds like it's definitely a major part of moving the whole thing forward. Yeah, I often think, because I'd cycle the canals out in Kildare quite a lot, and you're looking at the country from the inside out, and I imagine it's the same in terms of data collection. You're actually getting into the crux of it all. I feel like this is a kind of a possibly silly question, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. I know we're all trying to get away from COVID, but what is the impact of COVID on this project in a larger scale? Is it a blip, or does it change direction, or does it have any impact? It was on my mind for the last little while whether or not to ask that question, but I'm just curious, because it feels like COVID and all of the measures related to it is almost conflicting with our sustainability efforts of the last few years. Is that the case, or is it just a blip and it doesn't really detract us from the bigger project?
What do you mean by the bigger project?
Well, in terms of all of the work that you guys are doing in terms of clean water and sanitation, I was just wondering, does our experiences of COVID in the last 6 months, is it going to hold you back, or is it going to slow you down, or is it just a blip? Again, I'm coming from a very much a lack of expertise. This is not my area, so I'm just curious about the impact of COVID on it. Maybe in terms of the research, in terms of the larger project.
Okay, I can say from our perspective, just very quickly, one of the critical things is gathering the data for the index, for the indicator. And a lot of the countries that we were working with, people weren't able to go out and do the monitoring because it requires you to go out and take measurements in the field, because that's the only way you can find out what water quality is unless you use satellites. And we're not at that stage yet for most freshwater bodies. So there's going to be gaps which will affect the quality of the data and the actual index, and then may impact the assessment at the end of the day. But those gaps are being addressed to some extent, or attempting to be addressed to some extent, by modeling, which is one of the three things that the World Water Quality Alliance is trying to do, is to encourage monitoring, to also encourage the use of Earth observations towards water quality, and to encourage modeling towards water quality. They all have their ups and downs, but there are such huge gaps at the global scale that some of these other approaches need to be taken. And I should also say, I suppose, that the Alliance is trying to foster relationships with business partners who are interested in water quality and would be willing to, I suppose, come forward with some ideas or even some suggestions for approaches or equipment or whatever. So the Alliance is very open at the moment, and the whole goal is to try and increase our data gathering on the global scale.
That's interesting. That came across in everybody's presentation today, and I suppose it's very pertinent to the audience that might be watching here today, and that is that to connect this into the business solutions, and that's constantly the relationships you guys are looking to build, I imagine. Yeah.
I suppose just to support what Debbie was saying, COVID has given us opportunity, I suppose, to take time to think about what we were doing, because we spent a lot of time at home, but it also has meant that we couldn't go sampling as well. That was a big issue. So some summer sampling opportunities have been lost that will be pushed out obviously into next year. That's hardly the end of the world. I think one really important thing that it has done is to show the importance of biodiversity and to recognize that, and water plays a really important part in all of that, and our role in terms of the science in understanding that biodiversity and how important that is. Everything from the insect up is critical, and that's what COVID has told us, I suppose, and having time to reflect on that, hopefully when we go back out to normal, that we will have learned that that is a really important message, that biodiversity is so critical in the water context and in the wider terrestrial context. So I would say that has been an important message, and it has reflected back into stuff that we've done even since then around chemicals in the water.
Yeah. Yeah.
From our perspective, well, we still continue on to clean wastewater and deliver clean drinking water. But I suppose it affected us initially the first lockdown in terms of getting people onto sites as part of our upgrade systems and the work contractors that were working. We just weren't able to get them on site, but we have them there now. It is a new way of working, obviously, with different controls and probably not as fast as we would like to be moving, but that is the new normal. But at least it has opened up to the degree that we can now get contractors on site and continue on with our program of works. I suppose during the summer there, we were conscious of conservation because there was additional hand washing and etc., which we do need. So you're trying to balance that against, not filling the paddling pool, etc. During the summer months,
Yeah, Happy Birthday gets sung 79 times a day in my house, and I'm watching. And I'm a little like you. I'm from a farming background, so I keep up and I collect rainwater and I use just as yeah, so there's a conflict there, but it sounds like it's just workarounds, like every part of life.
It is just workaround. I mean, it's a new way of working. No different. Who would have thought we'd all be here on Zoom? So it is just a new way of working, and it's a new way. I'm hoping that as Fiona and Debbie said, that it allows us to think outside. We might look at things differently now moving forward, and help us all as a society to look outside.
Yeah, Fiona mentioned there time to reflect, and I think that's a big part of it as well, and maybe look at things in sort of an intellectual. Through a lens that you might normally have the time to do. Now I know that's what you guys do all the time, but just it hopefully it does allow us to kind of slow down and look at things in that way. Listen, I think we have lost a couple of people who I think might have run to 2 o'clock meetings. I just really want, before I wrap up, I just want to say a big thank you to Debbie Chapman, Professor Fiona Regan and Charlie Coakley for just taking the time to give some insightful and interesting presentations there. And thanks to all of the attendees. For those interested, I'm going to plug SDG 7 Affordable and Clean Energy will be presented next week. That's December the 2nd. So we'll be circulating a new registration link for that on the Business School .lab channels for anyone who'd like to listen in. We'll also be back with another Transform event soon. So Transform Work will run from December 7th, which will discuss the role of digital technology in the future of work. All change. So you'll find a registration link online and on our social media channels. So in the meantime, stay safe. Thank you for joining, and particularly a big thank you. I'm going to give you a little clap anyway. A big thank you to 3 speakers today. I really enjoyed it. Not my area, but I'm a bit of a nerd about conservation and things like that. So I really enjoyed listening to you guys today.
Thanks, Orla, and nice to meet you again, Debbie, and nice to meet you, Charlie.
Absolutely. Nice to sit right back at you.
I hope we can talk again soon.
Have a great day, guys. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.